Prickles and Mooch. I awoke from my coma, feeling pains in my body, knowing that I was still alive. Was it an instant that I passed, or was it an eternity? I could not tell. I felt as if I had been dead for 1,000 years, and brought back to life to live my life again. I was asked by the nurse at the foot of my bed if I knew what my name was. For a moment, I did not realize the severity of the question. In fact, I could barely answer the question. If only I knew that this was not a dream. I slipped back into sleep again. I dreamed of nothing, absolutely nothing. When I was awake again, a different nurse asked me the same question. Shortly afterward, my mother entered the room. She seemed almost in shock. She had this weird look on her face, a look that lacked emotion, a look as if she saw a ghost. I was not fully aware of the reason for me being there at this time, for I had been rushed into the hospital in a coma with a head injury and severe alcohol poisoning. My blood alcohol count was 3.90, and due to my head injuries, they could not pump my stomach. The real problem was that no one knew that I had been drinking like this for over a year before and ended in the hospital. I had been drinking recklessly at least 3 times a week for a year already, and this hospital visit was much overdue. My liver was so damaged that the doctor said I would never be able to drink alcohol again. I also had a lot of weight loss because when I would go out drinking, I would not eat for a day before I drank. And this last episode was a week of binge drinking. I knew that I was not supposed to drink, but the reason I did was because it made me feel better. I would use alcohol as a way of staying in the highs and avoiding the lows, but I did not know the real dangers of alcohol. I was too young, too foolish, and too ignorant to see the real dangers of it. When I got out of the hospital, my loss of memory seemed to worsen. I did not recall who my friends were at school, and I did not know what grade I was in. I also forgot who my girlfriend was. The doctor had told my mother when I was unconscious that I had a good chance of dying, or else I would be brain dead. When I returned to school, I was in the beginning of my grade 10 year of high school. It was in the gym at the assembly for the students on my first day back at school that my friends came to talk to me. I did not recognize them. They were no longer my friends. Perhaps it was because they had left me in an alley to die, and I could not cope with that kind of betrayal at such a young age. My first class of the morning was a grade 10 general math class. I think I will just talk briefly about what has happened to lead me to where I am today. In school that year, I did well in my math class. I did the best that anyone could hope for. I got a 100% mark. I think this mark is what got me onto the waiting list for an introductory co-op business school that was going to be starting at the next year at a prestigious hotel in my hometown. It was a new school that offered a hospitality diploma at the end of the year. I was put on a waiting list because the school was designed for grade 12 students. I took it on my own to take all the grade 11 classes I could and just leave my elective classes for grade 10 empty. By the time my grade 10 school year was over and I was about to start grade 11, I got the phone call to go to the new school. That year I met a lot of interesting people. I also learned a lot about myself and the workforce. It was a business-oriented style of school, which focused on co-op and classes on the job site. In the first semester, I got to know the people I would be studying with and the people in the hotel. We would spend 1 week in every department of the hotel. We did this until we got experience in all areas of the hotel. At the start of the second semester, I had decided I would major in the maintenance division of the hotel. I also talked it out with my teacher to do my classroom activities in the mornings and co-op after classes. I wanted to do it this way because I was also in night school and would be just waiting to go there after classes for a couple of hours. In the end, I also took on some correspondence courses. I was doing so many work hours and learning so much stuff that I ended up going way over and above on my co-op hours. My teacher really liked my report on my department, and because I had gone over and above the recommended hours, my teacher put me in for extra credit. In the end of the first semester, I had earned 4 credits. By the end of the second semester, I had earned an additional 7.5 credits in 1 semester. My grade average was 89%. I was so happy, my teacher opted to put me up for an award for personal achievement. I got the award. The next year of school was boring, but really simple. All I had left to do was grade 10 elective classes to graduate high school. I also had gotten a job at a car wash, and then I got a second job as a maintenance guy at a hotel. Everything was going well for me. Near the end of the year, my girlfriend and I were starting to drift apart. I was no longer happy. Even though I had so much going for me, I began to get depressed. I got a third job working nights at a nightclub that was very popular. I programmed and ran the light show there. And then, that is when I began to sleep less and less. I started to smoke dope. This ruined my relationship with my girlfriend, and she left me because of the person I was changing into. I had hit a new low. I was now doing the same sort of thing that I had done before, partying and abusing my body. I was aware of my situation and decided to stop doing drugs before it got a hold of me. I quit 2 of my other part-time jobs and was now only working the maintenance job. I was sad to see that after 2 years of working there, they only gave me a 25-cent raise an hour. I was insulted. I wanted more, but knew that without a proper education, I would not earn the kind of money I wanted. I applied for a student loan and a course in electrical engineering at the college. I got accepted. I was on my way to become an electrical engineer. I had been out of school now for a year, but thought that I could handle it. Everything was doing well, up until the point, at the end of the first semester, that they told me that the course is being cancelled, due to lack of enrollment. I was devastated. I had left my job and now wasn't able to go back to it. I applied for my old job back everywhere I had worked before, and the only place I could find work was at the nightclub I used to work for. I started working there, and it was only a short while before I began to drink. The college had advised me to continue my studies and just take a different course. They told me to take electronics engineering instead. I was depressed and worried about how I was going to live. I made up my mind to drop out of college and just go work for a while to support myself. When I went to drop out of the course, they told me that it was too late to drop out and that I would not be able to cancel my classes, which meant I would get a failing mark on my whole course. I just quit going. I had to move on. Trying to make ends meet, I often went without eating. I had begun to get pains in my body and went to the doctors. But the pain stopped, and I quit going to the doctors. I was becoming very paranoid and was isolating off from my closest friends. I ended up not being able to afford the rent at my apartment with the money I was making from the nightclub, so I asked my brother and his friends for help. They let me move into their place. I was paying a reasonably low amount for rent and was with friends that I thought were cool. But it wasn't long before I began to party again. I slowly began to lose sight of what was happening, and I was not paying attention to what I was doing to myself. Over the next 6 months, I began to lose weight, and I became very paranoid and suspicious of everything and everyone. Those 6 months actually seemed like 6 years. It's funny how time can do that to a person. By New Year's that year, I had gone overboard. I had taken too many drugs and drank too much for my mind to handle it. I was lost, and my roommates no longer wanted me to live with them. I got kicked out. My job's hours had been reduced to 8 hours a week at the nightclub, and I was so stressed that it began affecting my behavior. I asked my cousin and his girlfriend to move in with them. I think I was already really sick by the time they took me in. In the next 2 months, I really began to lose contact with reality. I know, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but unless you experience it, I don't think there's a better way to describe it. I became so confused. I came up with the belief that I no longer needed to eat to survive. At the time, I was seeing things in a different light. I no longer felt attached to the world. I began to feel that the world was not even real. By the time everything came to a head, and my family was sure something was wrong, I had gone without food for 15 days. I think what was happening was that my body was eating itself to survive, and that the drugs and alcohol that were in my system before were being digested. I was getting higher and higher as every day passed. I no longer felt the need for sleep, and was full of energy. The only thing I didn't realize was that my mind was not working properly. Everything seemed to be instant in my mind. My thoughts were racing from subject to subject, and I could not stay focused at all. I dropped down to a mere 90 pounds. I started to have grandiose delusions about myself, and thought that I could save the world, and decided to fix the problem of hunger and death. My mind was operating so fast at this time that I believe my thinking was transcending space and time. I know that matter cannot travel faster than light speed, but thought can, because it has no mass. The mind is very powerful, and it is out of this world at times. In my mind, I figured out a way to fix the problem. At the moment that I finished my calculations and went through with my experiment, my cousin came into my room, and while I was having one of those introspective realizations that had recently become so frequent, he told me that I was sick. He said that my mother was here to take me home, and that everything was going to be okay. I got up and took my college books with me, and also the notes that I had been writing, that now make no sense. Then I headed for the door. When I got to the door, there were 4 police officers waiting for me, and they told me to go with them. At this point, I was so lost that I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't myself. In fact, I was so lost that I did not even know who anyone was anymore. Under this new stress, I began to have grandiose delusions about myself. By the time I was brought to the hospital, I thought that I was a god, and then a few moments later, I began to think that I was the devil. I was freaking out, and I could no longer wait at all. I jumped out of my bed in emergency and climbed onto another, shouting and looking around. I was in my own world. I was in a state of pure emotion at this point, and I was trying to fight with all my efforts to hang on to whatever it was that was still me inside. The police came back, and they were trying to talk me down off the bed, but I was afraid that they wanted to make me suffer. After all the commotion and confusion, there was silence for a moment, until the officer's microphone spoke. Without thinking, I grabbed the officer's microphone and yelled into it, "You can be anything you want to be." At that very instant, the police began to slam me down to the table and tie me down. In my mind, the religious delusions I had been experiencing earlier came to a head when I called out for the Archangel Michael to come and tie me up in chains and throw me into the bottomless pit. I was scared and irrational. I was fighting for what I thought was the end of the world. It wasn't until one female cop asked me what I meant when I said, "You can be anything you want." And that is when I told her, "You can be a flower." I think that is when the medication kicked in, because I lost all fight and just surrendered to the situation, and it felt like I was disappearing, like I had never even existed. It felt like I was not real, and nothing was real. It felt like God was taking me away from this place. I let go of everything completely. I had this sense of peace that I never knew could exist in me. I was taken out of this place and brought to God, and He stayed with me as long as I needed to be with Him. When I woke up and came to, I was in another room in the hospital, and I was no longer tied down. I was very drugged up, and I had forgotten how I ended up in the hospital. I lost my self-awareness and ability for rationalization. I had this weird feeling that I had just become conscious from the time I was younger and in a coma. It was almost like everything that had led up to this point in my life was a dream. After a while, looking back on that feeling, I began to doubt my existence. I thought that I was still in a coma and just constantly dreaming. My family was at the hospital when I woke up. My sisters gave me 2 teddy bears, one named Prickles and the other Mooch. Looking back, I think that those 2 stuffed animals, I thought that they were representatives of who I was and who I wanted to be. Prickles, I thought, was for everything that led up to the creation and inevitable loss of the imaginary world I had built up for myself. Then there's Mooch, the person I wanted to be, just living in a dream world where I would be the only thing real in it. It was somewhat of a narcissistic kind of a reality, like an infinity loop of my life. I would wake up from a coma, live, and when I died, it would start all over again. Yet I wanted so much to be Mooch, a lost soul who got a second chance at life and would never really die. I think I drank and did drugs so I would be able to escape from my own fears and feelings to a place where I would be the only thing real in it. I decided to stop everything that made me feel away from myself. That was the beginning of the road to getting better. It wasn't until about 3 years had passed since I left the hospital that I began to take my illness seriously. Currently, it is 2002. After many hours of remembering every detail of my psychosis, I came to the conclusion that it wasn't real. I am not a god or the devil, and the world is not going to cease to exist when I die. I began to read and educate myself on the things I have experienced, as well as the things I find interesting. I have read a lot of information about mental health. I believe that I have been suffering from manic depression for most of my life, and perhaps I have a slight tendency when I am in an acute manic phase to swing towards schizophrenia or psychosis, but knowing this is the key to controlling it. I have had plenty of help along the way, and I have met a lot of amazing people in the process. I don't think that I could have become so self-aware if I were not given the opportunities that I have been. But, at the same time, I wish I could have had more help. I do not believe that just because someone has had a mental illness, that is who they are and will always be. There is light at the end. It is not always going to be bad. There will be great times as well as hard times, but that's life. We are meant to live life and enjoy it. I think that we are never given more than we can handle. Somehow we manage to leave our troubles behind as we grow. All I am saying is that if you give up and believe that you are genetically defective, that really takes away a big part of the real you, and it takes away hope. Understand that you can't take life too seriously, because you'll never get out alive if you do. I like to finish this with a quote I have heard that always makes me smile, and I hope it brings a smile to your face too. To be honest with you, I don't have the words to make you feel better, but I do have the arms to give you a hug. ears to listen to whatever you want to talk about. And I have a heart that's aching to see you smile again.